So my name is Jess Peterson. I'm the co-founder of a company called Paywast, which is based we have our headquarters in Kabul. We also have a small office in Dubai, and we have an office in Berlin, Virginia, down here. And we are a social network and a social media company. And we do the bulk of our work in Afghanistan, but we increasingly have projects in the U.S. and a few other places as well. I don't know how you usually do this, but if you guys want to discuss anything, ask about anything along the way, this is kind of a very open sort of format. So you just let me know if there's anything. I'll just start out with giving you a little bit of background of how we started and what we do and what sort of is the foundation of our work. And then I'll go into talking a little bit about some of our projects and some of our products and services as well, and how we came about those. So Paywast, we started in 2010, and the reason we came about is that the U.S. State Department have been looking increasingly at how to do social media in the countries where the U.S. is involved. Afghanistan, Pakistan, a bunch of other places. As a tool to engage citizens, especially those that are not really connected in terms of internet access, and how to make them engage with each other and share opinions and share stuff. So what happened was that the U.S. Embassy in Kabul came out with a solicitation in early 2010, encouraging startups and organizations and companies to come up with proposals on how to do a social network that would work for Afghanistan. My background is in mobile. I've been working in India before. I had a small mobile service company in New Delhi for a few years. Then I worked in Copenhagen for a mobile service provider. When this started in 2010, my now business partners, who were all friends in India, they're Afghan Americans, so they know Afghanistan, they know what's going on out there. They called me and they said, we heard about this thing coming out. Why don't we try and do a social network in Afghanistan? And I said, okay, yeah, sure, let's do a social network in Afghanistan. And we sat together. We started thinking about what is the infrastructure that's available in Afghanistan? How can we leverage that to build something that has that connectivity effect that Facebook, Twitter, whatever we had at that time. How does that work, and how can we emulate that using the infrastructure that's available in Afghanistan and the way that people use technology? So what we came up with, and probably the only actual way to do it at that time was to use mobile and to use SMS. SMS is sort of right now Afghanistan probably has about an 80% mobile penetration. At the time we started, it's probably a little bit less. But still it's something that's available to everybody, and there's no cost barrier. There's not really much of an obstacle to get started using SMS. The only thing is, of course, you have to be a little bit literate. You have to be able to read and write simple text messages. We thought, okay, let's build a social network that's still an SMS, and let's make it group-based. So when I sign up to the social network, I will either create my own groups or I will join other people's groups around the stuff that I want to share. So if I'm interested in cricket, which a lot of Afghans are, I could join a cricket group and talk about cricket or football or Bollywood movies, which is another thing that's huge in Afghanistan. Or it could be a group for my family where we discuss just family-related stuff, or my cousins, so I can talk to my cousins who are in the next door province and who I don't really get to talk to that much. So groups can be either public or private. So if it's a cricket group, again, I'd probably be interested in having anybody join, whether I know them already or not. But if it's a group of my family or my workplace, I would probably prefer that it's a private group, so that I have to approve the people who want to join my group before they can engage in the discussion. So what people do is they join groups and they create groups, and they start sharing. They send an SMS and it gets out into the group, I'm going to receive a group message, I'm going to respond, and it again goes back into the group. So it's really very, very simple. It's not that sophisticated, but again, we quickly realized we have to make a minimum features that are easy to understand, easy to learn how to use, and then try to leverage those to focus on the content instead. Encourage people to share quality content and find the groups that are interesting to them. So what we've seen in a lot of places all around the world really, but in the developing world particularly, and in the region too, Pakistan and India, is that SMS, after mobile sort of started picking up, SMS exploded. You know, you go to India and you buy a SIM card, half an hour later you start getting spam messages all the time. Probably the same in Afghanistan. But also that people use SMS much more than they do, or than they used to do in Afghanistan. It was something that the mobile carriers had promoted much more, and it's something that the users have picked up on much more. Probably also because, for example, in India, there are more people literate. But that had never really taken off as much in Afghanistan. SMS was not a huge thing, and I think it's a combination of the high rate of illiteracy. And that mobile operators in Afghanistan, they make a lot of money, and they make a lot of money out of voice calls. So that's really what they...
I'm sorry, I just wanted to interrupt you about, the whole focus on literacy, though. A lot of the stuff that's being sent, though, is not necessarily text.
Right.
I mean, people can send videos, and they do...
On SMS?
Yeah, in Afghanistan.
Well, you can send video, but to send video, you have to have data connectivity. 3G or QPS. Which is it's growing now, but at the time we started, it was very limited and it was pretty expensive too. So to send a 2-minute video, I don't know how much it would be, but it would be significantly more than what a lot of Afghans spend, per week.
Gotcha.
So it's possible, but on a mass scale, it's not. Maybe it would have. I don't know. We didn't focus on. We expected that would not really be something that would pick up hugely. So we decided not to focus on that. But we're doing more on the data side of things. I'll get back to that a little later also. But by the time we started, we didn't focus that much on that. So what we focused on was to have a way. We wanted to make it free so that there's no barrier to get started. So Paywast was free in the first year of operations, and you can send many messages as you want, and it's available on all the operators. So we made agreements with all mobile operators to support our network and support our shortcodes. And so if I have a SIM card from Etisalat, which is one of the operators, and you have a SIM card from Afghan Wireless, we can still connect as if we're on the same network. So when you're a Paywast user, you belong to our network more than the mobile service provider that you have. So we started out, and it took off very, very quickly. We had in the first 2 months, I think we had 200,000 users. Now we have around 1.6 million users. We're about 3 years into it. We had 1.6 million users. We have 1.6 million users. And in the first 2 years we sent around 500 million messages across the platform. There was a time, not anymore because the traffic has decreased, but now we're focusing a little bit more about quality than just having a lot of noise in the network. But there was a time where we contributed around 25% of the SMS traffic in Afghanistan. And the environment has changed a little bit now because people are sending SMS a lot. People are using mobile a lot more than they did when we started. And there are other players now doing other stuff. So this has changed, but we still have a lot of traffic on the platform. And the fact that we can connect people across mobile carriers is something that is very valuable to a lot of users because, yeah.
Oh, I mean, you can picture that. So I was just wondering, did you get any pushback from the mobile providers in that you made it available for free on all of them, or?
Well, I mean, so what happened was we got support through our agreement with the U.S. Embassy. We had support to pay for the messages. Okay. So it was free for the end users, but we would still pay the mobile operators for the messages that were sent. So we negotiated bulk agreements because 500 million messages, you have some negotiating leverage. You decrease the price a little bit. So we tried to do that. And in the beginning, the mobile operators weren't super happy about it because especially in developing markets where it's sort of very early stage, mobile operators like to, and that's at least what I've seen in Afghanistan and other places too, they like to keep what they do very close to them. So you do something mobile, it has to be there. They don't like to take their own brand and build it on top of there. Whereas we would prefer to see, not like that and yet, but we would prefer to see the mobile operators more as a pipeline, a utility, like an electricity company. We pay them for whatever we can do, and then we do whatever. We can connect any utility and some of that. It's not like that yet, but we're trying to push in that direction, and the operators are trying to push in the other direction, then we'll meet them somewhere midway. But one of the reasons why I think that we took off and managed to get users is that what we do is not really that different from what other social media platforms are doing. It's all about making people connect, and that is essentially what I mean. People like to do that. People like to communicate, and people like to be exposed to other people that are interested in the same that they are, meet people across geographical, societal boundaries, and have an opportunity to engage that way. So we really didn't do that much marketing. We did some TV advertising, wasn't that helpful. What was really powerful was the viral effect that you sign up and then you go and tell your friends about check this out, and they go and tell their friends, and that effect had a lot of power. In the first 3 months, I think we had around 300,000 users, and then we just. So what happened was, in the beginning, we didn't limit the usage. You could send as many messages as you want, which means that there were certain groups that were extremely popular. I think cricket was one, and then there was a group of people living in Kabul. And if you're a member of those groups, you would get upwards of 1,500 messages a day, and which is crazy. And we were talking about why don't people sign out of this? Who wants to be part of this? But apparently people do. A lot of people thought it was a lot of fun to see. So obviously we had to think about how to mitigate spam and abuse and all these things. It wasn't a huge issue. We had to monitor a little bit to make sure that people weren't abusing each other or weren't putting out racist stuff or abusive stuff. And if they do that, we'd be disconnected from the service. But it's never been a huge issue. Generally, people.
How did you know that? Like, were people there? Monitoring? Or
yeah, so we did several things. One of the things was we had a blacklist of words. So if you certain profanities and also it could be like radical Islamism stuff. If you would post that stuff, you'd be red flagged, and we have a customer support center who goes through those users and decide whether it's because there could be context where it's sort of okay, and there could be context where it's not okay, and based on their messaging, they would decide whether to keep them on the platform or not.
Is that for both private and public groups, or just public ones?
Mainly the public ones. Okay. But for other, let's say a private group, and you have an issue or something's happening. So we also have a call center that people will dial in. If they have a complaint, they could talk to our guys, and based on that, they would decide what to do. And, I think we had 1 or 2 cases where we actually had to take it to the police, but it's been very, very limited, the issues we've had with that. And we expect it to be much more. In the development phase, we spent a lot of time thinking about how we can mitigate cases of abuse and all these things, but it was never as big an issue as we thought it would be.
If everybody within a private group was okay with the language that was being used, and it still was red flagged to you, would you still intervene?
Well, it was sort of on a case-by-case basis. So if we don't receive any complaints, and we see that it's not something that's accelerating, we would sometimes not do anything about it and just let it go. But it's also about so if it's limited to a small private group, we'll probably not do anything about it. But it's also about not creating a bad atmosphere around this. So if you suddenly have an environment where it's okay or accepted that you can talk about all sorts of you can spread racism, or you can spread, because there's a lot of that in Afghanistan across ethnic groups, and you can spread all sorts of things. Then you didn't want to get to a place where it's out of control. and where 20% of our users are engaging in these kinds of things. So we want to limit it, but we also have cases where it's look the other way, because it's all about making it as open as possible. We don't want people to feel that they're being watched over all the time. So there's a little bit of a balance, and a lot of things we have to decide on a case-by-case basis. But of course, when you sign up for Paywast, you should be to SMS, of course. So you accept our terms and conditions, which is that you're not allowed to share this and that. So we have the right to terminate users from the service, but there could be cases where we don't do it. So Paywast is obviously still live, and we have our users are from all over the country. We have obviously the bulk of our users are from the bigger towns and cities, but we're increasingly seeing pick up from rural areas and from villages too. There's a lot of places in Afghanistan, especially in mountainous areas, where mobile coverage is very, very limited or maybe even non-existent. And the mobile operators have invested more and more in getting those places on the grid in the last couple of years. So we're trying to find ways to engage with those people too, because those are usually the people that are buying their first mobile phone today or tomorrow. You have a guy. The people in Kabul, they're already covered. Everybody who wants or can afford a mobile phone in Kabul, they bought it many years ago, or in the other bigger cities too. But the people in the villages are those that are slowly increasing incomes and sort of getting connected to the society, and those are the guys who are likely to get to go out and buy a mobile phone tomorrow and start looking into what can I do with this. So there's a big, not only in terms of what we do, but in general in terms of getting those people to understand the value of being connected. There's a big opportunity there, but also a big challenge in terms of education, because obviously that's also where illiteracy is most prevalent, and the whole tech savviness. People may or may not have a television, but that's sort of the level of technology that they're on. Yeah.
Were they able, when you had introduced and got them on very basic usage, quickly able to start thinking about the very practical uses for it? For example, I don't know, something really practical like farmers looking at, I don't know, weather conditions or crop life.
Yeah, very much so. So we've seen a lot of ways in which the people have just figured out on their own how to use it in all sorts of creative ways. Some that we sort of had anticipated, and some that we didn't expect at all. Well, so one of the things that we've seen is that we always expected that Paywast would be very much used by the sort of the Facebook generation, 15 to 35-year-olds, which it is, but also we're seeing that older people are starting to use it. We've seen mullahs, like 60-year-old Islamic clerics, sitting in their mosques and using Paywast to reach out to the people in their community and create groups on their own. And sometimes we've done small workshops where we've either invited people to Kabul or travel out into the country to teach them how to use Paywast, or just to see how they use it. And it's really funny to see a 60-year-old guy with a long beard, and he's trying to decide which nickname to choose for himself and stuff like that, which is really. I think this goes to show that everybody thinks, it's not only about, you can use it for a lot of serious stuff, but everybody also just wants the entertainment factor and the fact that you can just chat about whatever you want. And that's really.
But I'm thinking like real, as an operational tool for something, for services or for, informational resources that you might not have anticipated.
So what happened was, in the beginning, after we saw that some groups just went a little crazy, where we had thousands of people signing on to the same groups, and you just get messages all the time. We realized this is not helping anybody. So we limited the usage. So you could send, I think, 5 messages a day across your groups, and that also means, so that helped a lot in terms of.
That means the quality went up in terms of the content.
Exactly, quality went up a lot. The noise went down, but it also makes it hard to make a service rate if you want to use it for a group of farmers, for example.
Right.
But to accommodate for that, we made a separate program where we go out to organizations and companies and private sector and government and say, if you want to use service in an operational context, we can help you do that. And that I think is the next slide, one of the next slides. I'm going to go back to that a little bit. So yes, and we started getting a lot of calls really quickly. I want to use it for this, I want to use it for that, I want to use it for a company or farmers or to share stuff. We talked to a lot of universities as well, and high schools, and what it's used for the students. So there's been a lot of, and as much as possible, we tell people, just use the social, the standard features that are available to you as much as you want. But if your requirements go beyond that, that we can also help you. So what we started doing is that after, I think, about maybe half a year, 9 months into launching Paywast, we started to see some trends on the platform. And started thinking about how can we leverage what we've done already to spin off new products and new services that can help people. Because we have two things that are valuable to us. One is the platform that's connected with all the operators. It makes it possible for them to we have SMS short codes, we have direct connectivity with the operators, so we can launch new services. I'm not sure. Everybody's talking about big data. Ours is probably more like medium data. We don't have, because it's kind of limited to Afghanistan. But we have a pretty good pool of data of users and of demographics information that we can leverage to launch new things. So one of the things we're doing is we launch outreach programs, like you were mentioning, where we help organizations, government, private sector use SMS groups to share stuff, to reach out to their people, their beneficiaries, their customers, but also to get input from people. We've done a lot of campaigns with ministries who want to ask citizens questions about a number of things. What do you think about it? We did a campaign with Ministry of Counter Narcotics. They put up billboards around the country or in certain provinces asking them what is your take on growing coffee. Would you engage in that? What would you think if your neighbor starts engaging in that? Why do you think it's necessary to? So questions around that. And they got a lot of really interesting input because you can be anonymous. And there's a lot of, if you don't have to talk face to face to a person, maybe you're inclined to share a little bit more than the other ones would and be a little bit more forward about it. So they got a lot of interesting input on that. Probably not what they expected, or maybe they did, but not the most official answer from the government point of view. But they got a lot of interesting input on people's perceptions of growing coffee in Afghanistan. So we've done a bunch of programs like that. The media as well, where TV shows would encourage people to send in their opinions about stuff, and they would share it on the screen, or they would use it for surveys or other things.
Are these organizations or counterparts approaching you directly, or is the embassy sending them to you, or is USAID sending them? Is it a mix of just?
Either of those, really. Yeah, we have partnerships with World Bank. We have partnerships with we did some work with ISAF as well. We've done work with Afghan ministries directly. We've done work with media, either broadcasters themselves or media production companies who approach us, and a lot of NGOs too. So we apply the technology in whatever way we can, and it makes sense to the project. But yeah, any of those really. A lot of the work we've done with media has been a combination of news and current affairs, but also pure entertainment. I'll get back to that in a little bit also, but where we allow people to vote for favorite TV stars or American Idol kind of stuff, but also where they can engage in talk shows and ask questions to guests and all these kinds of things. Then we've been doing a lot of surveys, particularly recently, where we use our platform to engage users to respond to surveys, either on our own behalf. We did surveys around elections. There's a case I'm going to go back to later where we've asked people about the perceptions of elections, whether they're registered to vote, whether they feel it's safe to vote, and a number of other questions. And we've also done surveys with organizations. Oxfam is one of them. But we did a survey on women's rights earlier this year. That also yielded some really interesting results. So we're trying to apply our platform to put various applications on top of that we can sort of use to help help third parties reach out to the people. Then we've done a number of things that are not really in connection to our existing platform, but that are still, at least some of them, core to what we do, and sort of can be built on top of some of the stuff we've done already. We've been doing some health recently. We have 2 call centers in Kabul where we have employed doctors who help community health workers in the provinces help patients to get to the hospital or to this is a lot for maternal health. So if a pregnant woman is delivering at home, there'll be a community health worker to help her out, who would then call into the call center in Kabul, who would guide them through that process. And there's a number of other interventions that we help out with. So yeah.
Have you found that groups have been created related to health issues or? We actually had groups of community health workers in provinces using Paywast to communicate, sort of on a day-to-day basis. And it was not all health related. It was more of a social network for health workers. So they can get to know each other and in some ways exchange experiences and knowledge, but also just to chat really. And that has been pretty helpful in sort of making them feel that they're part of a community because there's a lot of these villages where there's only 1 or 2 health workers deployed, and it can be hard for them to reach out to their peers and to reach out to a larger context of what they're doing, and that can help them ask a question, hey, what do you feel about this? What do you think about this? Or yeah. And if it needs to go beyond SMS within those groups, right. If you need to do a phone call to someone within that group, is there a pricing like discount or
no? What I mean? There's not. I mean, so users can be anonymous if they want, or they can of course share the personal information if they want. So if they want to do that, they can just share the numbers and they can call each other. But that's not something weird.
That's outside of that. Gotcha. Yeah.
For the call centers, we're obviously providing a call-in line, which is free for the health workers to call into. But those are
So if you're in a group and you want to message just one person, does that person have to share their contact information with the entire group, or is there a way of?
No, you can. So that goes by your username.
Okay.
So your username can be your phone number if you want, but most people choose to make it something else. So if I want to message you directly, so there are different keywords that you use, and I'll put your username or your nickname, and I send you the message, and it goes straight to you.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, that's how most people do it. And there's actually on that there are a lot of so people usually would choose, for the nickname, a combination of their real name or something else. But we've seen a lot of, so we have around, our best estimate is we have around 50% women on our platform. But there's a lot of women who would, in the nickname, pose as a man. So they call themselves Mohammed something, because there's a lot of, they feel safer that way.
Right.
And the moment, what also happens in a lot of groups is the moment someone sees a female nickname, she would start getting a lot of traffic. And that's, I mean, a lot of people just don't want that. Not necessarily in a negative way. I mean, there's been some cases of that, but not necessarily in a negative way. Just getting a lot.
They're dating, like happening?
Not dating, but courting. You can have,
Yeah, I just actually, talking to Josh's point a little bit more, I was just wondering what kind of activities have been spun off from this activity, if you like, from the mobile space. Have other kind of physical meetings or different groups been established as a result of this? So they're sort of like...
You mean facilitated by us, or just...
Facilitated by people getting together in these groups and then deciding that they want to meet personally, or they want to go into an email or whatever kind of...
Well, there are some things that we know, and then I'm sure there's a lot of things that we don't know because we can't monitor whatever it's going, and we're not necessarily interested in monitoring whatever people are talking about. But we do know that a lot of schools and universities around Afghanistan have used it to organize stuff, from classes to events and also in a social context, people getting together. So that's being used a lot, and obviously that's also because that's where the young people are. So we've had some youth organizations using it to organize events, and there's actually an internews. There was an internews event a couple of years ago called Youth Voices or something, and they used Paywast a little bit to reach out to the users and organize local events. things. And there was there's been a number of organizations using it to get their people together. But when it's just an informal thing, a group of people that may or may not know each other already, but deciding to do something, we probably don't know about it. But Afghanistan, especially outside of the big cities, Afghanistan's a closed communities, so people are probably not that prone to just getting together if they don't know each other already. I'm sure it's happening, but in a very limited way. Especially women would usually not engage in these things. That we had some organized events where this was actually ISAF that organized get-togethers between mullahs and sort of the elderly in the communities, and then young people, men and women from villages, and getting them together in a safe context where they would discuss a number of things, formally and informally, and also then they would, by the end of the event, they would sign them all up for Paywast, and then they could continue the conversation on mobile, which is again, in a safe environment where people can talk about it.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, if there was like closed groups that were safe groups, like for women, or who knew that there weren't kind of outsiders in there, but there really was a safe space for them.
Yeah, and that's been happening in an organized way where we know about it, and probably also in ways that we don't necessarily know about. We did some work with Oxfam last year. We're still doing it, but the project is closing down now. But where it's a women's rights project where they're engaging women to share sort of microblogging or citizen journalism, where they encourage young women to share whatever they think about, whatever they think about certain current affairs or events, and share it on SMS, and then they upload it to a website where it's being anonymously published. So people are doing that too.
One more question, sorry.
Yeah. No, sure.
With surveys, I was just wondering, are organizations using this tool to solicit information in the service of designing new interventions for people and stuff like that?
In some ways, surveys is still a little bit new to us. We started doing it last year, so we have some experience. But my last slide is about a case of a survey we did, so that probably I have more details than that. But we want to, we want to use the surveys for people to take action. So otherwise, it won't really work that much. It's good information, but we need to use it for something. So we very much hope that it can be used either to maybe decide on what more information because there's only so much that you can do on SMS. If you want to ask people 60 questions and have like 3 paragraphs of response for each question, there's no way you can do that on SMS in Afghanistan or anywhere else. But if you have a preliminary overview of what people think, and sort of in a large context, because the advantage is we can ask a lot of people very quickly, and then you get to know, okay, well, what are the overall perceptions on A, B, and C, and then decide, well, that could probably point us in the direction of what we need to ask now.
Yeah, I could see instant polling on various things could be very
exactly.
It could be a very kind of
So that's some of the things we've been doing around.
But also the idea of creating kind of closed groups or expert groups or panels of people who can give you kind of feedback on stuff on a sort of ongoing basis.
Yeah.
Not something too arduous, but just really kind of like ground level feedback
of
what's going on.
Right. Well, that's actually, I think that is on the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about this because one of the things that we've been doing to encourage usage of Paywast more than TV advertising or billboards or whatever is that we've engaged a team of, we call them service ambassadors. In the picture you can see one of them around Afghanistan, and they're typically university students or young guys, young women who are working for us on a part-time, free-time basis to sort of be a local ambassador for Paywast. So what they do is they usually tie to a university or a school or the local village. Then we provide them training in whatever we do. We provide them information material, we give them t-shirts and caps and all that stuff. And then they become not only a promotion, not only a local promotion vehicle, but also sort of a customer service So instead of the whole culture of calling a call center in Afghanistan is not really that big. So instead of that, a lot of people prefer to have someone in the local community that they can go to and ask, hey, how do I sign up? Or what, can you give me some groups I should join? Or what, tell me about this. Probably someone they already know, or at least they have friends who already know, so there's a trust that's already created there. So we had, we had at one point we had people in I think 10 or 15 different provinces. In these provinces had like 5, 10 young guys, some of them young women too, going out to the peers in the neighborhoods or in the schools, and sharing the message about Paywast and helping people get signed, and helping them get started with joining groups and sharing messages and things. And that's proven really, really valuable to get new users on board. But it's also been very, very helpful for us because what we do is we try to harbor as much information as we can about the people that these service ambassadors talk to. So we try to make them log all the conversations they have, what is the topic of the conversation, and especially if people have complaints or or suggestions, I don't like this, what's going on, or wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And try to find common trends around that and use that to build new features or build new services that people can use, that people can be happy with. And a lot of the stuff that we've done since we launched, and a lot of the new things that we've built is based on these kinds of interactions. So finding out what it is that, how do people use the service, and what can make them use the service in a better way. And it's really, yeah.
I was going to say, in that vein, has there been anything that surprised you that's come from the community as a sort of design suggestion rather than something that you thought?
Yeah, one of the things that kind of surprises is how little of concern it is to people that they get a lot of messages. Right. Because I would think, if I get 250 Facebook messages a day on my Facebook account, I'll be a little annoyed. And I would probably not take long before I deactivate my account, right? That is not an issue to anybody, to most of our users anyway. When we started putting in limitations, one of the reasons is we wanted to reduce the noise and increase quality. But another reason is also we can only pay for so many messages, right? So at some point the money will run out. And that's fine. But we prefer that the money we spend on messages is being spent on quality. But it's not really a concern to most of our users. So people really want to share, and people want to be able to join as many groups as they can, and one of the things we really have been focusing on after launching the Service Ambassador program is discovery. So how can we make people become aware of new groups? Because people will find groups, so they'll create their own groups and have their friends join them. But it's also important that they share stuff in the right context, because a lot of them are, they have a lot of things to share. They have, good informed opinions about a lot of stuff that's valuable to people. So we need to sort of funnel them in the direction of how can they meet like-minded young people, and how can they sort of use what they share to get good feedback too. So we've used that to sort of try and find ways to suggest groups and suggest context that people could share stuff.
Is there any one place that somebody can go to see what groups exist? To see if they could join them?
Yeah, technically yes. We have a website where people can log on to, but I think less than 3% of our users have ever logged onto the website.
So if somebody was creating a group and wanted to announce that somehow, could they then send out, in any way, a more broadcast message to announce their group?
Yeah, exactly. So we have a recommendation. So that's actually something we put on top of some of those. We have a recommendation feature where people can announce their group and just share a few words what it's about, and then they would start sending that out in their immediate, the first degree network, and if people need quality, they would just start sharing virally. So you can pass that on.
Right.
And that's one of the things that's been helpful in terms of getting people to sign into this stuff. It's kind of a balance, because we want people to share as broadly as possible, but there also has to be the likelihood of someone signing up to a group, if it's coming from someone that they already know, is much bigger than it's just coming from somewhere that they have relation to.
Okay.
So we want to spread as much as possible, but we also want to make sure that there's some connection there that people can see. So those are some of the things we're working on. Okay. But we do have a lot of groups that's just a mix of people that probably don't know each other already, and they end up in the same group through friends of friends of friends, and it's across geographical boundaries, across societal boundaries, and it's across, maybe most important, is across gender too, because having that conversation between young men and young women in a safe way, but also where they can discuss serious stuff, is something that a lot of young Afghans have not been exposed to earlier, or sort of offline. And if we can create that conversation, that can open up to a lot of understanding, and a lot of probably provoke new ways of thinking in some ways. So it's been very important for us to create sort of that safe environment where people can be totally anonymous, and if you feel that people are harassing you, you just sign off and you won't have to deal with that anymore. So that's one of the things that we spent a lot of time going out into trying to reach out. It's hard to go like into the deep rural villages. You can't really, because you don't know what TV they're watching. If they're watching TV, there's not really any way to. You can travel there, but it might be hard to just come from out of nowhere and start telling people, because it's such a tight knit. Those communities are tight knit. So
find some segmentation on the network of like people like I love city, or like the Kabul people, and like village people like I love living in villages. Sort of like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not directly, but we see, because we see, for example, there was a group for Kabul that started taking up, because we launched in Kabul, right? So that's sort of where we started. There was a group for Kabul that started taking up really quick, and those were not all of them, but most of those people were people in Kabul. Mm-hmm. But then we also see if we do a campaign in a province, it quickly spreads, because someone living in one of the bigger towns in that province will have a cousin who lives in the village, and then it'll spread that way. So that's a really good way of growing it. So we can sort of do a raid in two towns in the main city of the province, and then we quickly see a pickup in that area.
And what's the scale of members in a province, or?
So we estimate, we don't know the location of all our users, but we have an idea, and we estimate that around 30% of our users are in the provinces, in villages, in small towns, and around, I think, 45% are in Kabul and Kandahar city.
Actually, what I was asking, like what is the number, a rough number, let's say, of users in Helmand province?
We know that around, I think 30% of the users are in the south, Kandahar, Helmand. Okay. And a few other parts, but Kandahar and Helmand are really the bigger.
Okay.
So that would be around 500,000.
Okay. So it's still quite.
We have a lot of users in the south, especially in Kandahar city, of course. Helmand is. We have quite a bit of users in Helmand actually. It's really interesting. We've seen that during our surveys recently, which I'll go back to later. There's a lot of people in Helmand interacting, and
is that because there's a lot of international and a lot of military?
It might be part of it, but I also think we've done a lot of radio station tie-ups in the south. Okay. So we've had a lot of surveys with radio stations that encourage people to sign into certain groups. Gotcha. And that sort of spun off people just continuing even if those programs have stopped, they're just continuing the debate. And now they know what it's all about, so now they can figure out ways to stay on. And we've received some really, really articulate input from those guys. So they're interested in sharing. It's been really interesting. On the scaling issue, before we launched, we didn't really know where it was going to go. I mean, all we knew it could last for half a year and then it would die. And we had no idea, or it could grow big, but we really had no benchmark and no precedent to go by. So we tried to scale. We tried to be able to support any scale, but then again with the operators, they weren't super keen about it. they weren't too happy to give us a high amount of bandwidth of SMS messages to send. So we thought, oh well, whatever they give us is probably fine. So what happened was, about a month into launch, we had we brought down one of the mobile operators' SMS system. So we had for about a week. I think we tried to send, at one point we were sending about 400,000 messages to the SMS system in 1 hour, and then it crashed, and we had to go to the CEO of Etisalat and talk to him about how, we told you this was going to happen, and we really didn't, but try and find ways to mitigate that, and they weren't too happy about it. But I mean, we're paying for the messages, and, but you're not supposed to do this, and looking back, we should probably have been prepared to support a much higher scale, and it's still sort of, we're still sort of operating just below the limit of what we can do, because it's always the operators. It's always like it's hard to convince them about these things, and they like to do things their own way, and they know what they can do. But then when a third party comes in, they're like, yeah, whatever, we don't trust you that much. You can pay us where we want, but that's it. So there's always a lot of talks going on, and it's gotten a little better now, but it's always an uphill battle that talk to the operators, convince them to do something, and then we build on top of that. So if I were to start a new country now, I would probably start with just a very small thing to build that trust, and then start scaling up from there, because it's.
If you were going to do it again, and I'm just wondering, when you introduce a technology like this into a country that, hadn't ever really had it, or hasn't really had a lot of the mass communications in it, you sort of are opening a Pandora's box. You're mentioning the technical one where you sort of maybe overwhelmed the mobile system, but were there some social costs? That maybe not anticipated, or you anticipated and wanted to do minimal harm or do no harm if possible, with forces like the Taliban, with people with conservative ideologies in the country that say, technology is bad, or other kinds of, social or cultural issues that might have present a danger in this environment.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Was that a question, or?
Yeah.
When we go into a lot of places, a lot of times, especially for places like Afghanistan or Southern Sudan, we're actually creating these stations. We are changing that environment. We are changing that information ecosystem, if you will. Yeah. And which means that it's totally open and neutral. Right. And it can go in 100 different directions. Yeah, and although we'd like to be able to do that, one of the things we have to be really cautious of, for example, is making sure that we have some plans in place that the local, rebel group or whatever is not going to take over the station and start using it.
Or like the Taliban uses it as a way to threaten people.
Yeah.
So
I'm not thinking about these things before.
Yeah. But even some of them you probably wouldn't have anticipated at all, and they happen. And maybe if you could do it, and so I'm asking if you could do it again. What were some of the things that you would have flagged or would have?
Well, we got a lot of in the beginning, especially we got a lot of attention from the MDS, the intelligence service of Afghanistan, who were in a way they were a little bit excited because they I don't know if they saw new ways of getting information, which we haven't given. I don't know what they have, but we haven't given them anything. But on the other hand, they weren't super happy about it, because who can use this and how can this be used in various ways? So we actually had to make a case and convince them how we plan to mitigate this. We haven't really had any issues. We had a few calls from them, but we haven't had any issues with people with intelligence trying to shut us down or anything. But that was a concern. And again, people have taken the service in ways that we didn't anticipate. Happily, not that much in a negative direction, but it could. It's not that it couldn't have happened, if people wanted to do that. And the good thing is it's pretty easy to shut down users because it's all centralized. So if we see a cluster of people using a negative, we just shut them out of the service. That doesn't mean that they can't buy a new SIM card, of course, and get on it again. But then we can find ways to sort of monitor that kind of traffic. But I could definitely see that when you have infrastructure at a local level, like a radio station that can be sort of hijacked. You know, that's definitely. Have you seen that happen? Or?
Well, we've had several occasions when I've had to like shut down stations or take away the transmitter or a certain part,
right?
And they leave so that it can't be used after we leave, that type of thing.
Right.
But for example, I mean, not to spend too much time on this, but for example, if this technology offered a networking capability that there were no other existing technology that offers,
right.
you know, level of networking, would it not be possible for a group, whether it be Taliban or other, to actually create a group, whether it be public or private, and just make sure that they identify whatever your red flag words are, and that they don't use those red flag words, that they have other words to be used, even if it's just to organize.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, would you even know whether or not they were actually organizing, you know, various things?
No, that could easily have been the case, and it might have happened, you know, for all I know, and. But that's sort of the trade-off you do if you make an open service, right?
And I'm just curious.
Yeah, but it's a concern, and but then again, mobile operators actually were concerned about this too, which is kind of silly because you know you can just make a call and organize whatever you want. So it's that could easily have been the case. Yeah, definitely.
This might be on a later slide, but do you have like a sustainability or business plan moving forward? Or?
Yeah. So we have. I'm going to get a little bit more into what we do with like third parties and our partners and customers and stuff on the next slide. So we have an outreach program that is. There's a number of different products depending on the context that we need with it. So we work a lot with NGOs, government, private sector. And when I say government, that could be a ministry, or it could be a municipality, or it could be a government agency of some sort, to engage with citizens and reach out. So one of the things that we do is we allow people to get input. For example, with a campaign with the Ministry of Counter Narcotics, where they would speak about their opinions on foreign policy. But it could also be an NGO. For example, the project we did with Oxfam, last year, was on women's rights, and they would encourage young women and men, for that matter, to microblog around human rights and women's rights, and those messages would then be shared on SMS and on the website that they would put online. We also did a lot of information campaigns on health, for example, where we send out messages in certain provinces. About a year and a half ago, there's an outbreak of polio in one of the provinces, and we send out messages to people with advice on behalf of the Ministry of Public Health. In some of the provinces where we have our M-Health call centers, we send out information to you for maternal health and these kinds of things. So it's two-way, and the really basic thing is just, you know, an organization coming to say, you know, we work with 2,000 people around the country in our programs. How can you help us reach out to them on a regular basis, and how can you help them to send us information back in on a daily basis or whatever? And so we set them up with it could be either a web interface, or we can feed it, if they have existing software, we can feed it into the database, and then they can use this information in their work. And the good thing is that these things are sort of instant. If you have an NGO and they're sending out a question to 2,000 people, have you done this or that today, or what do you think about this? The response will be usually within 2 or 3 hours. As a rule of thumb that we've seen so far is that if people don't respond to an SMS within a couple of hours, they're probably not going to respond at all. So when we do these campaigns, the response is rapid, and you can very, very quickly use that input if you want to ask additional questions, or use it to take quick action, or whatever it is that you need to do. So
what's the rate of response, and have you seen over time a declining or increasing?
So it depends a lot on the context. If you're an NGO and you have 2,000 people who are close to you, who you work with on a regular basis, the response will be very high.
Yeah.
It could be up to 89%. If you're doing a broad survey, sometimes we do surveys among our user base, and if we send out questions to, say, 50,000 people, on the elections we got really good responses. As opposed to before, we got around 20% of response. So we received around 10,000 responses. If it's a little more loose and something that's not really as interesting to people, it will be lower. It will usually be around 10 to 20% of surveys. But the closer you are to the people that you're connecting with, and the more relevance you have to them, the higher response rate you'll get. But then there are other things, like if you're providing an incentive for them to respond, it'll go up rapidly. But then you can also start asking questions about how biased the feedback you'll get. So there's some parameters that you can tweak. But usually, if it's just like broad survey-related stuff, 10 to 20% is what we see. So what we like people to do is, of course, always that's sort of the next step that we're usually not that much involved in, but to take that data and convert it into actions. But what we spend a lot of time working with partners is what is it that we need to do to get the information that we need to take action on that. So it could be, if we're asking people to share their opinions on women's rights, we ask people, do you think women should participate in politics? Do you think women should be allowed to go to college? These kinds of things. And a lot of people think that they shouldn't be allowed to go to college. So then, how can we do to change that opinion? And then there's a lot of things we can't do. But then how can we use the same technology to change people's perceptions a little bit, or to keep sending them impartial information that can maybe change their opinions in that. And so that's something we try as much as possible to work into the programs that we do.
How do you make that judgment?
Well, the final call is usually about partners, because we usually don't do these things alone.
Right, because everyone's thinking about behavior change.
Yeah, so
strategies for it and all that.
So a very, very big part of it is repetition, and that doesn't really matter if it's entertainment related or if it's human rights related. But what we've seen is if you want to convince people to do something or respond to something, keep telling them, right? Every day for 3 weeks, and you're going to slowly see a pickup of people. I mean, there's always people that you can't touch or that you can't do anything about, but to get a little bit of an impact, repetition is really key. Just sending, health, for example, just sending one message telling people to wash their hands before they eat is not going to help. But if you send them a message every day telling them the benefits of washing their hands before they eat, and you do that for 3 months, there's a good chance that a lot of them will actually start.
Does anybody track that? Any organizations are working with?
No, well, not that I don't have any data on that. We do a little bit of follow-up on our health programs, and the feedback that we get is that the more we start repeating things, the more often we do the same thing, the more impact it has on the local level. But I don't have any data so I can say this much and that much. So one of the things that we also try to do is try to find ways that it's always pretty easy to engage people in the cities. If you're an NGO in Kabul, you can invite people over for a workshop and they all show up, or if you do it in the other big cities. But where the challenge is often to reach out to people in the rural areas, not necessarily in villages, but just in small towns where if you're maybe you don't have the budget to send people to 15 different provinces to do a workshop. But you could contact people in 15 different provinces to get feedback on this, and that's not mobile. And that's one of the things we do. How can we expand the outreach by connecting people through SMS? And that's a case I was thinking about. I forgot about it. But there was So we've worked with organizations to sort of engage, to group the people by the location and we work a lot with broadcast media as well, TV and radio. and that's for entertainment stuff. The picture in the slide is from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in Afghanistan. And we did an SMS quiz for that, where you have the questions, and the audiences can text in their responses as well. And out of the people who answer correctly to all the questions, there will be a lucky draw and who win something. What's been extremely popular recently is those X Factor style shows. There was a show recently on a channel called Horseshoe TV, I think it was, where it was, I think it's called Cinema Star, where people would act, and they would select their favorite actor out of those. And it was extremely popular. We got on the final show, I think we got 100,000 votes in the last hour of the show. But this again is a very typical case of how people start using these things in ways that we had not anticipated. So what happened here, we found out pretty early on in the show, which lasted over I think a month and a half or 2 months, is we started getting calls from the TV station about, because we allow people to vote more than once for each contestant. We started finding out that people were voting for themselves, not once or twice or 10 times, but thousands and thousands of times. So what happened was that, and you pay for these votes. You pay 2 apps or 5 apps, which is in Afghanistan, even in Afghanistan, is a pretty small amount. But the main price of the show was a new car, probably worth $20,000. And so what these guys would do was they would invest in the chance of winning the show, and they would find a way to buy credits to vote 5, 10, 20,000 times for themselves, and engage all the friends to start voting. So at the end, there were 2 guys who, by all accounts, did exactly that, because we had one day where we had like 14,000 votes with the same number. And we built it every time, so it's a lot of money, And we had 2 guys who had almost the same amount of votes from the same number, from 2 different numbers, but it was all from the same numbers. And obviously one of them won, and the other guy didn't win. And they had probably invested around $15,000, $20,000 each. So obviously the guy won, and he got his car, and he could sell it, and he could recoup his investment. And now he's a famous actor, sort of. Not necessarily a very good actor, but he invested and he won.
And for effort.
Yeah, and so this is how these guys go about that. So I mean, we were pretty surprised. We were pretty surprised, and we asked the team, "Are you okay with this? Do you want to go on with this? Do you want to find ways to stop it?" And at the end of the day, we didn't tell them not to do it from the beginning, so we had to go on. The next time we're going to do it a little bit differently. But that was just very surprising to see that people, it takes a lot of courage to do this. The money. Yeah, it's very.
Which Bollywood star are you? Which farm animal are you?
Obviously, it's not really, there's probably a lot of other contestants who were better, but So, one of the other things to do is we work with a lot of talk shows and news shows, current affairs, where they would have guests and politicians and discuss an event, or discuss, elections, or discuss the American military pullout or whatever it is. And then people would be able to send in questions and ask the guests, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? And that's been a really good way for people to engage, because TV is always one way, especially when you're far from the main cities. You feel a little bit detached from what's going on in Kabul. That's also what's creating a lot of distrust in government. You feel that you have no voice, and the fact that you can now text in, to a talk show and ask a minister, some of you would have otherwise never been able to reach out to. What he thinks about a certain topic, or share your opinion on a certain topic, and have him give you your feedback is something that people really relate to. So when we run these shows, we work with one of the bigger ones is Channel 1. They run a show called Kabul Debate Live, which is viewed by a lot of people in Afghanistan. And we get a lot of messages, right? We have to filter out because there's no way they can ask all the questions that people are sending in. But it's really, and the quality of stuff that people are sending is really good. And that's one of the things we've seen since we started, that the quality has gone up a lot. And people are usually pretty well informed. The kind of questions they ask are pretty informed and pretty balanced in many ways. So it's really interesting to see how that is increasing. Right now we work with around, I think, 10 or 10 or 15 different TV stations and radio stations, and what a lot of them are doing is they're using the SMS services, obviously to get engagement with the audience, but also to generate revenues, because a lot of TV or radio stations, they're not really making that much money, and selling ads is an uphill battle in Afghanistan. And a lot of them have been depending on donor funding, which is slowly decreasing now. A lot of TV and radio stations have closed specifically because of that. So any source of revenue is something that they're welcoming. So if they can create a service that has 10,000 people send an SMS at 5 apps pop once a week, it's not going to be able to sustain the operation, but it's a nice addition of revenue that brings to them. So we're sharing the revenue between the operators and the broadcaster. So what we've done is we've done a lot of work to sort of help the broadcasters design programs where they can use mobile. And we made a little mobile broadcasters handbook that we hand out to anybody who wants it, really. And we do workshops in Kabul where we invite producers and journalists to give them ideas and also to hear what they would like to do and to design new programs. We have a media engagement team in Kabul who are, and this is all they do. They go to media, they go to these production guys, they go to the reporters, and try to figure out how to optimize these programs. So what we do a lot is, again, to make these things successful, repetition is a really, really big part of making it successful. So they do a lot of spots, and just to show you an example of some of the stuff that they do. So exit the full screen here, right? Yeah. And then. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I think I have one slide after this. Okay. So we'll be. Is there do we have like 5-10 minutes left, or?
I might have to run out, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I can listen to the.
Yeah.
I need to get into something before 10:30 arrives, but I'll check out the end.
Okay. I'll go for 5 minutes. So for the actually the talk show voting here. So what they do is usually they do it in spots. They go on for. So here they would tell people how to vote. They would ask people for the talk show, what do you think about the future of democracy in Afghanistan? They give me 3 different options, and then they would text an A, B, or C to our short code, and they would show a graph slide. This is what people think, and they would ask to get to the studio. So now we can see that, 30% of people are concerned about the U.S. withdrawal. What do you think about that? And they usually, what they do is they usually do this not only during the show, but also a week before the show, leading up to, so they can start harvesting a lot of feedback when they actually start the show. Yeah, that's what's loaded. That actually our advertising agency in Kabul came up with that. It's in Afghanistan, in Dari. It's called the Goya Understand. Speak with your fingers. So that's what we used a lot in the beginning. Not so much anymore, but it's try to put it in all our material. So last year we made an agreement with the Ministry of Communications in Afghanistan. They have a project with World Bank, which is called the ICT Sector Project, which is to launch a mobile government platform for citizens to reach out to use government services through mobile. The quality of government services, public government services in Afghanistan is very low. There's a lot of petty corruption, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of obstacles. And what they wanted to do was to create an easy path for people to access government whenever they need to do stuff. Check their taxes or renew their citizen ID or whatever it is. So we worked with the Ministry of Communications to launch 30 different applications with ministries and government agencies that will help Ministry of Interior, it will help municipalities, it will help Ministry of Education, and a bunch of ministries. Really, not 30 different ministries. I think 20 different ministries and government agencies with 30 different applications that citizens will use to communicate with government. We're launching it. We're launching the first few applications this spring, and that will enable people. So one of them is for high school exams. We're sending exam grades to students across the country. Another one is really similar to weather app, but and then we're doing a tax application. People can get the taxes on SMS, and IVR as well. They can dial in and get the information through voice. So what we're really trying is to make an open platform that any government agency that is citizen facing can use to develop an application, or will help them develop an application to go out to the citizens. So as of now, a lot of citizens around the country, again, they feel very, very disconnected from the government, from society, and having a mobile platform that lets them access all these services. One of the goals, hopefully, is to have them feel a little bit closer and feel that they can get a little bit, feel they get information a little bit easier, and feel they can reach out to government a little bit easier. So it's a project we've been working on for a year. It's going to go on for 3 years until we're fully launched. So that's going on.
Is that part of MGov?
It's MGov.
Okay.
Yeah, it's MGov. So it's called HOSA. That's the brand that we built around it, and it's owned by Ministry of Communications. It's funded by World Bank. We're the implementer, but it's really all about empowering the ministries and the individual government agencies. So we spend a lot of time talking to them. What would make your work easier, and how can we help you reach out to citizens through mobile? So we go to them and we help them build these applications, and it's free too. So there's really no downside to them to launch this. So it's part of, we're running for 2 more years, which is when we have all the applications launched. Now the last slide is just I wanted to do a quick case of the election service we've been doing recently. A lot of the polls that have been done by Afghan media for the last elections. There's been a lot of bias and distrust around them. A lot of the media stations, as you know, they're owned by like local warlord and local this and that. So they would always find ways to spin it in their own favor. And we thought it would be really, really interesting to leverage our platform to ask people what they think about the elections. So we asked 50,000 people last week. We got around 10,000 responses on 8 different questions. Next week we're doing a round more, probably asking maybe 50,000, maybe a little bit more again, and sort of collecting results on that. We're analyzing all the data we're getting, both on our own, we share it with anybody who wants it, media and anybody else. But we also are developing a website which we're launching on Monday, where people can log in and generate graphs. So if I want to see number of Afghans in Kandahar who have registered to vote versus Afghans in Badakhshan who have registered to vote, I can generate a graph on the fly. So you have to send you a link once it's up and running, log in and generate your own data. And we also got a lot of comments from people sending in. We made a Twitter account. It's called AF Speaks, where we're posting comments from people, anonymously of course, about what they think about elections, interesting stuff in there. It's in a mix of English and Dari and Pashto, but even in English there's a lot of interesting comments as well. It's been really interesting to see. It's got to be, we've had it covered in some of the Afghan media. Now we've been doing some more analysis this week on the data. We're making a PDF with a bunch of information, and we're sharing it with international media too. So it's coming out in a couple of days, and we hope that it's going to have. I mean, there's a lot of people doing. Internet as well as doing some polling in Afghanistan, and there's a lot of the broadcasters there, and a lot of organizations too doing polls. But we thought it'd be interesting to do it with our audience. Of course, it's important to keep in mind that our audience is not 100% representative of Afghans, because illiterates and all that are not really part of our user base. But it's interesting to see what people who are already using the services to make it that way. So that's been really interesting. It's ongoing right now. So.